eat my shorts.
You just bought yourself another Saturday, mister.
Crushed.
The version of The Breakfast Club you've seen is not the real movie. John Hughes cut over an hour of footage from the original, scenes so dark and strange that Universal demanded their removal, and then the negatives were destroyed. That lost hour is gone forever, but the cutting room floor is just the beginning, because behind one of the most beloved films of the 1980s sits a production history filled with firings, feuds, and bizarre accidents that nearly derailed everything. Over the next few minutes, we're walking through 10 genuinely weird facts about this movie. From a lost version no one was supposed to see, to an iconic song that literally nobody wanted to record, to the actual reason the cast kept falling asleep on set. By the end of this, you'll never watch the film the same way again. Number 1, the lost cut. Here's something that should bother you. The Breakfast Club, as you know it, runs 97 minutes, but the original cut ran 2.5 hours. Hughes didn't trim a scene here and there. He carved out an entire hour of this movie at Universal's insistence, and the studio was convinced audiences wouldn't connect with it. Too long, too weird, too much. And that's when things get strange. In December of 1999, Hughes sat down with Premiere Magazine and dropped something that sent film historians scrambling, revealing that he still possessed the only copy of the uncut version. The negatives of the deleted scenes had been destroyed, which meant every frame of that lost hour existed on a single tape in Hughes's possession. Premiere Magazine got to watch it, one of the only documented screenings of the full version ever conducted. What filled that lost hour turned out to be darker than anyone expected. One scene featured Carl the janitor predicting where each student would end up in 30 years, and his predictions were brutal. Andrew becomes a middle manager who marries a beautiful flight attendant who gains weight. Allison becomes a poet nobody reads. Bender takes his own life. Brian passes of a heart attack at 35 from stress. Claire gets 6 facelifts and 2 boob jobs by 40. That's the movie Universal Buried. An extended marijuana sequence showed Brian and Claire singing a Beatles song together, while another scene followed Allison breaking into the teacher's locker room. A fantasy sequence had each character imagining the others as archetypes, with Andrew as a gluttonous Viking, Bender as a prisoner, Claire as a bride, Brian as an astronaut, and Allison as a vampire. John Bender's introduction got gutted too. He was originally supposed to arrive in a rusty truck, dropped off by his abusive father, but instead, we just see him walking into frame. The context of his home life, visualized rather than implied, landed on the cutting room floor. The real Breakfast Club has never been released, and now that Hughes has passed, it probably never will be. But what's almost stranger than the lost footage is the building where they filmed it. Number 2, the school that disappeared. If you've ever wondered why the school in The Breakfast Club feels so eerily empty, like the hallways stretch forever with no life in them, the reason is simple. There wasn't any life there. Maine North High School in Des Plaines, Illinois had been abandoned for 3 years when Hughes showed up in 1984. The school opened in 1970, closed in 1981 after just 11 years because enrollment had collapsed, and by the time cameras rolled, the building had sat empty and silent, gathering dust. Which brings us to the iconic library, and here's the thing, that library is not a library at all. Maine North's actual library proved too small to film in, so the production team built an entirely fake library inside the school's gymnasium. That 2-story set with the wooden railings and scattered books was constructed from scratch on a basketball court. What happened to that building tells its own strange story. Maine North High School now serves as headquarters for an Illinois State Police District, and the gymnasium where they built that famous library has become a warehouse for confiscated and lost property. Somewhere in that building, tucked into a stairwell, sits a small shrine, consisting of a framed poster and a sign that reads, "The film The Breakfast Club was filmed in our building." That football field, where Bender throws his fist in the air at the end, sparked decades of arguments among fans about where it was actually shot. Some claimed Glenbrook North, others insisted on Maine South or Maine West. 2015 brought an answer when the film's cinematographer, Thomas Del Ruth, put it to rest in an interview with the Chicago Tribune, confirming they never left the premises. The field behind Maine North was where they captured that iconic moment, and that field has since been demolished, but that wasn't the only thing 2015 revealed. Before we crack on with the rest, please subscribe to my channel and like the video. I'd appreciate the algorithm boost immensely, thanks a lot. Number 3, the buried screenplay. Staff at Maine Township High School District 207 were cleaning out old offices at Maine South High School in 2015 when they discovered something buried in a filing cabinet. A first draft screenplay of The Breakfast Club sat inside, dated September 21st, 1983. Alongside it was the original Universal Studios rental contract for Maine North, $48,000 for full 24/7 access to the building. The superintendent's copy carried a handwritten note in blue pen reading, "Reviewed and approved by Dr. Murphy." But the strangest part wasn't the contract or the script. Correspondence in that same filing cabinet revealed an early working title Hughes had considered for the film: Saturday Breakfast Club. Imagine a world where that's what we called this movie: Saturday Breakfast Club. The entire cultural identity of the film, that simplicity, that directness, that now iconic title, almost didn't exist. 30 years passed before anyone found these documents, and they'd been sitting in a filing cabinet in a suburban Chicago high school the entire time. Speaking of things that almost didn't exist, there's a very famous janitor in this movie who was originally played by someone completely different. Number 4, Rick Moranis got fired. Rick Moranis, the beloved comedic actor from Ghostbusters and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, was originally cast as Carl the janitor and filmed for approximately 1 week before the production removed him entirely. Here's what happened. Moranis showed up on set and decided to play the character as a broad Ukrainian or Russian stereotype, complete with gold teeth, a heavy accent, an odd hat, and a provocative chain of keys that he would swing between his legs. His vision turned Carl into an SCTV-style sketch character, big, broad, and absurd. One problem destroyed that approach. Carl isn't that character. Carl is a former student of Shermer High who never left town, melancholy and reflective, and the whole point of the role is that he represents what happens when you don't escape. Producer Ned Tannen pulled the plug. Hughes had tolerated the performance briefly, but eventually concluded that Moranis hadn't actually read the script. John Kapelos came in as a replacement, and that's when things got uncomfortable. Kapelos's first meeting with the young cast included a warning not to overdo their performances, and to illustrate his point, he referenced Martin Sheen having a heart attack on the set of Apocalypse Now. What Kapelos didn't realize was that he was standing directly next to Emilio Estevez, Martin Sheen's son. Estevez was reportedly furious. Years later, when Kapelos appeared on The West Wing, he told Martin Sheen the story himself, and Sheen apparently found it hilarious. But if you think the Carl situation brought chaos, wait until you hear what happened with the song. Number 5, the song Nobody Wanted. Don't You Forget About Me stands as one of the most iconic movie themes ever recorded, defining The Breakfast Club, defining Simple Minds' career in America, and making the film impossible to imagine without it. But here's the thing, Simple Minds didn't write it, they didn't want to record it, and they weren't even the first choice. Keith Forsey and Steve Schiff wrote the song specifically for the film, and then the rejection chain began. Brian Ferry said no because he was too busy recording his first post-Roxy Music solo album. Cy Kernan of The Fix declined and went on to record the theme for Better Off Dead instead. Label executives suggested Corey Hart, but Forsey rejected him, feeling Hart lacked the right voice. Billy Idol turned it down, though Idol himself has disputed this on social media, claiming the song was written for Simple Minds from the start and was never offered to him. Multiple music historians have reported otherwise, which leaves the truth genuinely contested. The song finally landed with Simple Minds, and Jim Kerr, the band's singer, wanted nothing to do with it. He refused repeatedly to record a song written by outsiders. What changed his mind came from home. His wife at the time, Chrissy Hind of The Pretenders, convinced him to just do it. Simple Minds recorded the entire song in a single afternoon in November of 1984, then forgot about it. May of 1985 brought a surprise when it hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song became the 16th biggest single of the year in the United States, selling over 7 million copies worldwide, and it remains Simple Minds' only #1 hit in America. A song that nobody wanted, recorded in an afternoon by a band that didn't care, became immortal. Speaking of things that didn't go according to plan, number 6. The poster lied. You've probably seen the iconic Annie Leibovitz poster for The Breakfast Club. The 5 characters clustered together with Bender's fist raised in the back, one of the most recognizable movie posters of the decade. But the labels on that poster are wrong. The film describes the characters as a brain, an athlete, a basket case, a princess, and a criminal. The poster calls them a brain, a beauty, a jock, a rebel, and a recluse. Princess became beauty. Basket case became recluse. Criminal became rebel. None of this came from John Hughes. Universal made a marketing call, softening the language for the promotional campaign, and in doing so created an ironic tension with the film's actual message, which is explicitly about rejecting labels. The poster tells you to see these kids as types, while the movie tells you that's exactly the wrong approach. That same poster image got directly parodied by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 in 1986. Same pose, same composition, completely different vibe. The poster's legacy tells one story, but the film's influence on television tells another. Number 7. The Simpsons connection. You know the phrase, "eat my shorts." Bart Simpson made it famous, but he didn't invent it. John Bender says "eat my shorts" to Principal Vernon in The Breakfast Club, and Judd Nelson confirmed at a 40th anniversary panel in 2025 that John Hughes wrote the line, pulling it straight from the script. 2 years later, The Simpsons debuted on The Tracy Ullman Show, and by 1990, Bart was saying the same phrase in the episode Bart the Genius. And that's where things get murky. Nancy Cartwright, Bart's voice actress, has said she improvised the line at a table read, inspired by a marching band chant from her high school. Genuine debate exists about whether Matt Groening drew influence from The Breakfast Club directly, or whether Cartwright simply reinvented the phrase independently. But Groening's connection to the film doesn't stop there. The robot Bender in Futurama carries his name as an homage to John Bender, and Groening confirmed the reference was intentional. The loop closes in perfect fashion. A Futurama episode shows Bender the robot finding a Bart Simpson doll, pulling the string, hearing the doll say, "eat my shorts," and then eating them. From John Hughes' script to The Simpsons to Futurama and back again, a 40-year pop culture chain starting with one line in a high school library. Speaking of that library, the conditions inside it were genuinely brutal. Number 8, the heat that put the stars to sleep. Remember how the library was built inside a gymnasium? That decision created a serious problem. Cinematographer Thomas Del Ruth wanted intense overhead lighting to create the film's signature atmosphere, that diffused, slightly dreamlike quality. But all those lights generated massive heat in an enclosed space. Temperatures in the upper portions of the library set reached between 95 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. 5 young actors, teenagers all of them, were baking on set. Between takes, they kept falling asleep from heat exhaustion. The production's solution was to hire 2 additional assistant directors whose primary job became keeping the cast awake between setups. That's the glamour of filmmaking. 5 of the most iconic teen performances in movie history were delivered by actors who were physically collapsing between scenes. And one of those actors was changing right before the camera's eyes. Number 9, the growth spurt of a star. Judd Nelson has told this story multiple times. When he and Anthony Michael Hall auditioned together in New York, Nelson stood approximately 2 inches taller. By the time filming wrapped, Hall had grown past him. Hall hit a growth spurt during production, one of those sudden teenage transformations that happens in weeks rather than months. This created a problem for the character. Brian is supposed to be the smallest, meekest member of the group, and a towering Brian doesn't fit that role. Watch the film carefully and you can see how they concealed it. Hall appears frequently seated while others stand, and when he's sitting next to another character, he's slouched down. The staging was carefully designed to shrink him. Ali Sheedy apparently had a nickname for Hall during filming. She called him Milk and Cookies because he was so sweet-natured, though Hall reportedly didn't love the name. But Hall wasn't the only one who was supposed to look different on screen. Number 10, the dancing scene that was very different. The famous group dancing scene, all 5 characters cutting loose in the library, almost didn't happen the way you know it. Originally, the scene was scripted for Molly Ringwald alone, with Claire supposed to be an accomplished modern dancer, and the sequence would showcase her skill. One problem derailed that plan. Ringwald couldn't dance. Hughes rewrote the scene to include all 5 teenagers, transforming a solo showcase into the group catharsis we know today. Ringwald has admitted that she stole her moves from Belinda Carlisle of the Go-Go's. Watch the scene again and you'll see it. The energy, the arm movements, pure Go-Go's choreography. One actor's limitation became one of the film's most beloved moments. Here's what you've learned. The Breakfast Club you know is an edited-down version of a darker, stranger film that no longer exists. An abandoned school that's now a police warehouse served as its filming location. The most famous song was rejected by 4 artists before a band recorded it in an afternoon just to stop being asked. The poster contradicts the movie's own message. Conditions on set ran so brutal that the production had to hire people specifically to keep the teenage cast conscious. And yet somehow it became one of the most enduring films of its generation. That's the thing about movies that last. They're not made under perfect conditions, but despite everything working against them. If you want more deep dives into the bizarre production histories behind iconic films, subscribe now, because there are dozens more stories like this one waiting. And the next one is even stranger.